Yeah, well, one problem I see is that there is a wrong assumption that a lot of people do, that they tend to follow beings that are in the physical,
Hmm.
and they don't see that there is a big difference when you get messages from somebody living in the non-physical, like Seth. And I don't think Seth is at the top, so
Hmm.
we can even extrapolate Seth. But I don't know, for some reason, people don't give Seth the importance that he has. So they rather follow somebody else that is limited than take into account what Seth says.
Well, the thing that I notice is that a lot of channeling these days reflects sort of like the term a pulling rank. Like I am channeling Archangel so and so, or I am channeling, source energy. And and that might be true, but the complexity of the information being passed is not at the technical complexity that Seth was trying to describe things. Even though Seth never claimed to be an archangel or anybody of any specific power. In fact, he would argue that all of us have the same potential as he has.
Let's talk non-physical, non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let's talk non-physical. Let us have some spirit talk. Some spirit talk. Let us have some spirit talk.
Right, and it makes sense. But we don't know exactly our limits when we are out of the physical.
So I would argue that based on what I've been doing of interviewing various people in spirit, it seems like there's still a certain amount of fragmentation of consciousness. Now, it could be that the majority of our consciousness refocuses into a much higher realm, and we just sort of have like straggling thought forms or smaller consciousnesses that exist in other realms. Or it could be that the thought form that is associated right now with our physical body, and then when the physical body dies, it's free, may or may not have as much access depending on its evolution. In other words, I can't guarantee that I'm going to have 100% access to my soul complex or my higher self when I die. I don't know that for sure. It's possible that me, Michael, will have to do a certain amount of soul searching, so to speak, for me to reach those levels. Like I may have the free will where I don't necessarily need to reconnect back to the central complex immediately. And so it all depends on my will. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily even take the time to merge back to their soul complex because they're not at that stage where they're interested in doing so. They're still interested in Earth life and Earth-like environments.
Yeah, but for example, Seth doesn't talk too much about merging. For example, merging is more something that was some belief that was spread around some other people, but he's not saying a lot about merging.
It's talked about in Newton. Seth talks about right with retrievals. Even Seth talks about retrievals. So we don't know exactly what's going on. We don't know if there's maybe like multiple, like some fragments just go straight to headquarters, and but I know that there's some stragglers. We know that some straggling occurs. Now it could be that all these stragglers are just meaningless pieces of the whole, or they could be important pieces. I simply don't know enough information to conclude. When people have NDEs, sometimes it seems like they're entering a pretty high up state. Sometimes they don't. I don't know.
Another thing that I suspect is going on is that, because I noticed it when I watch some video or something on Netflix, for example, is that I noticed that I'm not the only one watching, because I see a scene that is it has a lot of emotional background, like something important regarding love. And even before it starts, I'm starting getting vibrations, starting getting some feedback. And I think it's because I notice some other beings or some other parts of myself getting emotional even before I get emotional.
Yes. So I call it the gallery effect, that there are fragments of myself that may be fully integrated and merged with headquarters that seem to be watching my life along with me at the same time.
Right. But so basically what I'm trying to say is that the we may have a lot of on-demand access. Basically, for example, you can do a task isolated, but then when you want to achieve a bigger task, then on demand you get extra support.
Yes.
Maybe because you request it, or maybe because they come to you because they notice something and they say, "I want to jump in." I think that's the type of thing that goes on.
Yeah, and I think that there's still, each one of the fragments of myself are still on a growing and learning process, and they can be activated or used for the current mission as needed.
Because another thing I think is, what about the limits of freedom? What if, for example, I want to do something and other parts of myself, other beings want to jump in? But what if I say, I want to handle this myself? I don't want, I don't want integration. I don't want help on this particular event, let's say, or something I'm doing uh, currently, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I might want more support or more integration if I'm doing something else, but I might want to do some training to myself where I don't want much help. And actually, that's the typical that goes on physical life. Usually, you're mainly by yourself.
Yeah, no, if you follow the logic that you can call up help when you need it, then the opposite should be true too, that you can actually call off help and say, you know what, I got this. I think the one realm where you may get help even if you're kind of demanding not to is if they feel like you're, if like your life path or a potential for injury, they may be a little bit more forceful if they think that something majorly bad could happen and they want to avoid a major catastrophe. But I think for like day-to-day situations, they can back off if you ask them to.
Because one case I'm thinking, uh, what happens if I am firm in not wanting to have anything to do with this type of reality anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what if some other parts of myself disagree with me? I mean, basically, am I free to have some kind of separation, even though we might still get linked somehow? But I kind of like follow a path outside this reincarnation process.
Yeah.
And okay, I mean, you do it, you do what you want, I do what I want, and we can still be linked.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not
yeah.
typical, but maybe that is possible.
So you hear about this concept of walk-ins. It's possible that maybe what a walk-in is sometimes is just another fragment of yourself who is interested in coming back here, takes over the realm or helm, and then you, the ego, decides to go off and do your own thing for a while, outside of your physical body. So you kind of switch places with one of your other personalities. I think as the soul develops, it needs to have non-physical operations just as much as it has physical operations, because there's a lot to learn in the non-physical. And so, because there's different things that non-physical operations entail. And then Bruce Moen talks about this, that he discovered lots of aspects of himself that actually never had incarnated, but specialized in non-physical operations.
You know, one thing that I feel like, I mean, surprised or I find it interesting is the suspicions I have, like the following. I think that originally beings were fully in the non-physical.
Mm.
And then it's like they are used to the non-physical. That's what they had. And then the virtual realities like this one, they started to come one after another one, then more and more. And so then it was like the new thing. The new thing is the virtual. So maybe they gave more importance to this kind of experiences with this. I mean, I call this like a very restrictive virtual reality because you get even a memory wipeout. But I mean, the funny thing is that while I am here, I feel exactly the opposite. I feel that I want more the non-physical than the physical. So I'm kind of like, you see that I feel the opposite, that I feel like I'm wasting my time in this game. I want to be on the non-physical. But maybe I understand the opposite can happen too. And that's why it's like you are in one country, you miss the other country, then you go to the other country, then on the other country you miss the first country. Yeah. So you might go back and forth between the two places.
Yeah, we've debated this before about what can you accomplish in the non-physical versus the physical. Like we talked about this concept of maybe instead of having 80-year lifetimes, you could have like a one-day lifetime where you have a memory wipe for just one day. You do an activity and then you wake up and you see how you did. But that, like, the 80-year lifetime, at least from your perspective, is like overkill in terms of the amount of stress and strain, the lack of feedback, the lack of memory. I feel like this particular universe, and then this particular civilization, Earth, where it's like double lockdown. Like the physical universe has certain lockdowns that prevent free flow of information from non-physical to physical, and then you come to Earth where there's further confusion. So this is quite the extreme. I mean, would you be interested in a lifetime? I use the term Pleiadian, where from birth to death, everybody in society understands the non-physical, communicates freely with the non-physical, but yet you're still having a physical lifetime.
No, not really.
Okay.
What I don't understand is why they think it's good to have because I consider it a long period of time, even though I heard that from another perspective, they might think this is very short, like let's say 70 years, like an average. I think it's more productive to have, let's say, maximum like a week. That even you have a temporary wipeout and then you experience something physical for a week.
Sounds like you want to incarnate as a fruit fly.
No, but not in an incarnation. I'm talking about.
I'm just teasing.
Being a human.
Yeah.
But only for a week, not for like 70 years. And then you can go back. It's like maybe you have a week and a week.
I think what you postulate is that there could be simulation environments that would only last a week. They would be human-like. They would be computerized, whatever. So one thing about this particular world that we live in, people call this a simulation and whatnot, but it required a lot of buildup to reach the point where we're at. It required a lot of stress by a lot of souls, and also a lot of evolution of DNA and all this stuff, just to get to the point that here we are having this conversation. So it's a very energy intensive or time intensive or whatever you want to call it simulation. I think once we develop like VR software, maybe, you know, that's sufficiently complex, then we can just use that instead and have shorter, you know, experiences where we just, you know, immediately incarnate into an adult, do a thing, and then leave. But in the current way that this universe is set up, it's hard. This isn't a good place to have 1 week human experiences.
Actually, now that you mentioned this, I think it might be possible in the future if science advances to the point of being able to control memory. Let's say, like, have something, I don't know, maybe nanobot that would erase your memory for, like I said, for a week or a day.
Mm-hmm.
Do something, and then your memory comes back. So with that, you can get immersed in a virtual reality without knowing that you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Total Recall, was something like that.
Yeah, I didn't really see that film, but it kind of reminds me of dreams, to be honest. I mean, a dream is like a few hour experience where you temporarily suspend your disbelief and you exist within an alternate environment. It's I would say it's low res. It's glitchy. If you actually sit down and figure out what the narrative, you realize that there's a lot of plot holes, but at least it's a primitive form of a short-term amnesia like you talk about.
I think that what happens in dreams is that they work on demand, because for the experience itself, you don't need a lot of details, a lot of resolution. And actually, when you are focusing what's going on, you might increase the resolution temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, actually, I think I had it last night. I had a dream that at some point I wasn't focusing too much what was going on, but then I noticed something that was unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I noticed that it was unusual, I paid more attention and I got better resolution. Like, for example, I noticed I was walking among people. I was in some kind of like it was like an Airbnb, because it wasn't like a hotel, but it was like people in a building that were having different rooms, but it looked more like flexible, not like a hotel. It was more like an Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I was walking and I noticed in front of me was a girl, and I noticed that I was about the same height as the girl.
Mm-hmm.
And that said, what's going on? I mean, I'm taller. How can I see at the level of the girl?
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly I wasn't that tall.
Mm-hmm.
And then when that happened, I pay more attention to details like the hair of the girl and other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And other things that I remember that I switched the resolution was like I was trying to meet some people in that building. Um, the building had like several floors,
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason I took the stairs. So when I took the stairs, I paid more attention to the stairs, so I can really use the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed the difference that at some point I skipped some steps. Let's say I'm flew to the next level.
Yeah.
But basically, if I didn't pay attention, I might fly to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
But if I paid attention to how I reached the other level, I might go and focus more on the stairs. So depending on your focus, you might change the resolution of what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like for me, dreams are a very thinly veiled simulation, and as soon as I realize that I'm dreaming, it's like the facade just doesn't work anymore. And if I try to focus too hard on the plot, it starts to get all messed up. So I feel like dreams work best when I'm just only half in it, like when I'm so low thinking that it's believable. But yeah, I also skip stairs. in dreams where I'm able to just like move really quickly downstairs and not have any issues. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like dreams are like they're just not as like the emotions that come out of it are interesting, but like the realism is always to be desired.
Yeah, because in a way, I think you get enough resolution to keep you going in what you're doing, or what you're feeling, or etc. Because especially when you focus on a person, because you might see people and you might not care about the details of the people, but then you feel somebody you know and you might focus on their eyes and stuff like that.
So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes people seem real. Sometimes people don't seem so real. You know, it depends on where you are, whether it's a shared dream or if it's just a bunch of dream characters that have been created for you to interact with.
Actually, I want to tell you something that even though I think I did it before, but now I think is more entertaining, is that remember I used to create like a path that I go and move forward. That's something that I do very often because I like to get motion, because motion gives me diversity and can get new stuff with emotion. But then I'm becoming more flexible with emotion. Like I have like a road, for example, and now I can go higher in the road. So kind of like a drone going up.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I can shake everything in a way that is more like a tunnel. And then in a tunnel, I can create like subtunnels or basically like I can create like a hole on the mind, let's say. Like I'm seeing some path. And the path, that's another thing I do too, is that sometimes I let something solid come without caring that I had to skip it. Because usually the default was I go in the direction where I can keep going forward, right? Skipping like a mountain on the left, a mountain on the right. But sometimes right now I'm being more flexible, more free, that I just go through the mountain, let's say. When I go through the mountain, I start seeing things that look more solid. But even though I see things like look more solid, I create a tunnel inside that. It's kind of like I'm inside a mountain, but I create tunnels and tunnels. And then it becomes kind of like a game because I create a new tunnel and the new tunnel takes me somewhere else with a different background. And then even though I get to the new background, I create a new tunnel. This is something I've been doing recently more with this tunnel. And because it reminds me some experiences I had in the past. And then I remember also what you told me, that usually when you get to do a retrieval, you open like a portal or something like that. Maybe you can you tell me about something like that to relate to what I'm doing with the tunnels?
Well, I feel like a tunnel is created. So when I ask to do a retrieval, I'm in a dream state. It feels like they create a tunnel beneath my feet, and then I just fall through it. And it can take up to 45 seconds. You would think that why couldn't it be instantaneous, but it isn't. And I can sit there and I can count. I go 1, 2, 3, and I just keep falling and falling and falling. And then finally, I'll go plunk and finally hit like the region where I need to be. And if I've fallen that long, it's usually very, very dark, and it's an open expanse, but it's very dark. And then I'll have to demand light, and then I start just looking around the scene, looking for, a thought form or a fragment. So as far as creating my own tunnels, I would say generally I haven't tried that. I can lift up scenes, but I haven't tried creating my own tunnels.
Well, in my case, since I did so many visualizations, I think I can try these things, and hopefully something similar is going to appear in like a lucid dream or. Um, well, anyway, I want to switch the conversation a little more to the differences between the non-physical and the physical. One of the key things is that my way of thinking, and I think your way of thinking is similar to mine, is different with the standard way of thinking by society. Because I think society centralizes on the body. Because, for example, saying, oh, you're pretty, or he's pretty. I mean, he's beautiful, he's handsome. But that's one way of seeing things. That is, everything comes from the body.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite, the other way of seeing is that the body is just an avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So then you separate the body with anything else. And for example, that's the thing, because you see, like recently I saw a picture of Clint Eastwood.
Mm-hmm.
And Clint Eastwood, I mean, he is very old now. He's, I don't know if he's 93 or something like that.
Yeah.
And since I always liked Clint Eastwood, I don't see him, I mean, his soul as the look he has now.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's very clear that his body, his avatar is deteriorating. Well, everybody's avatar is in mine too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the soul that drives. I mean, it's like judging a driver by his car.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be the same driver and you can change cars. You can have suddenly a new car, then you can drive an old car.
Mm-hmm.
But the driver is the driver. The car is something else.
Yeah.
And then I like to compare one way of thinking with the other one. In general, I like to compare. Well, we did in private conversations, you and me. What is consciousness itself? What are the common things that we have both in the physical and both in the non-physical?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the things that are like fundamental in the non-physical?
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to start with that. What is fundamental in consciousness that is not dependent on the physical? One, well, maybe I say some things, then you say other things.
Okay.
So let's focus. What is purely non-physical? What is the features of the consciousness in the non-physical? One of the things is, well, we also have a concept of time. We have something that happens before, something else that happened later.
Mm-hmm.
So time is there. Even though a lot of people like to say, oh, there's no time in the non-physical and all that stuff, but I disagree with that. That's another topic maybe for another video. What else? It's a spatial awareness, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not saying space is real, even in the non-physical, space might be an illusion, but what is not an illusion is the sense, the spatial, how would I call it? Spatial sensory feeling or something like that.
Yeah, there's a sense that you exist in a certain point and that there's things external to that point. You could theoretically have an experience where you're everything all at the same time, but I think the default state is that you are an observer, like a point observer, and you can observe the things around you.
Yeah, I relate to the physical because, for example, when you have certain, let's say, a little pain on the foot, you get a relationship of the distance from, let's say, the center of your body and the foot. You know that it's located. Like, for example, you close your eyes, and the feeling you have on the foot you know that there is a difference with another feeling you have somewhere else. So you have that spatial sensory, how do you call it that?
Yeah, well,
Spatial.
there's a term that they use for divers.
Because I don't want to use perception, because the problem with
Yeah.
perception is that it's related to the physical. But maybe we can call it spatial non-physical perception, maybe something like that.
Okay.
Maybe there is a better word. But let's adapt the perception. It's like a spatial perception, but in the non-physical.
Yeah.
And what else we have? We have the feeling of going up and down. I mean, feeling of acceleration. That would be the motion.
Yeah.
That is related to the spatial, but it has the.
So we can feel like both velocity and acceleration, where the velocity is us relative to something external to us, kind of like when I fall down the tunnel, somehow I have the sense that I'm falling, even though, it's not, and I'm not accelerating. I'm just kind of flowing naturally. But then I also have a sense of acceleration, like when I lift up something, and I keep focusing on lifting, it seems like it accelerates. It speeds up. I feel like things are speeding up. So yeah, so there's certainly like velocity and acceleration.
Also, I think there is a sense of, I would call it rigidity, or the opposite. Like you feel more like drained in motion, like you cannot do much, and then you can feel exactly the opposite, that you can accelerate anywhere. You are so free, so light, let's say.
So sometimes, at least when we create a perceptual body around our consciousness, it tends to be rubbery. It tends to have like a certain feel to it. It doesn't feel like a physical body. It's more kind of like a squishy kind of form we create around ourselves. Now that could just be a primitive construction of our consciousness, but that seems to be something we're capable of doing, is creating a form. And it may be subconscious, like we don't even realize we're creating a form. And it seems like, yeah.
I don't know if you have this experience, but I'm pretty sure you did. Let's say you're in a dream and somebody's chasing you, or let's say a lion, or so a typical thing that happens in a dream like that is that you must start running pretty good, but at some point it's like you wish to run faster, but it's like you can't. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna be rich, but I want to go faster, or I want to walk faster, or run faster, and you feel like a resistance. Bless you.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you notice that resistance, let's say?
Yeah, sometimes I'll feel like an environmental factor could be holding me down, or I might feel lethargic, like it's harder for me to get up, to levitate than other times. I rarely run out of energy when I'm running, but like if I'm lifting up, I might, I don't know, there's like a certain expenditure of something when you do things that are not natural.
It might also be self-inflicted. It's possible that when I feel that I can run as fast as I want, it might be because of my fear of being reached. I might inflict that on myself. Another thing that happens several times to me is that, and I think it is related to the physical, that when you're trying to talk, and in only, I would say maybe 5% of the time, something like that, and that I want to talk exactly like the physical instead of talking freely, let's say, like in the non-physical. And then it's like I force myself into trying to move my mouth, or that connection. Then I feel like I cannot talk very easily, that it's difficult for me to talk. And it's because of that link, I think. But it's similar to the resistance I'm talking about while running. There's some other type of resistance.
For me, talking is, depending on which astral subplane or wherever, I may find that it's more difficult to utter sounds. Certainly, I think telepathy is less painful if you can allow it. The other thing I wanted to say, which I think is a very important component of our consciousness, is that we can think. And sometimes our thinking is less powerful than it is while we're awake. And then maybe for people that have NDEs, it may be more powerful. But it seems like even though we don't take up space, we seem to have like a CPU that is able to process thoughts very quickly. And those thoughts don't seem to take up space. They just seem to be within this point.
Another thing that is not clear, and this is the type of thing I think I might find out in the non-physical when I'm fully there, is how much we are a separate hardware or like hardware in the cloud.
Mhm.
Because I don't know exactly if I am a particular server in the cloud, or in a certain aspect I am something separate in the aspect of my limitations, my current state. Like I have certain fears, so that points more to being a separate server. But in other situations, like for example, when I do the visualization, I feel more like I'm using the cloud. So maybe it works like our current computer, that we can do both. You can have your computer and run software on your CPU, and at the same time connect to, let's say, Google Cloud
Mhm.
or the AWS, Amazon, and run something in another CPU, right, or another GPU. So I think maybe both are going on. So we cannot really know exactly. Most probably we are both. That's my guess.
Yeah, no, that's my friend was telling me yesterday that in some of his non-physical experiences, when he creates an environment, he feels like he's using himself to create that environment, if that makes any sense. In other words, we have like a certain allocation of consciousness, and we can shape it however we want. Now in Qigong, which is what I'm going to be doing in an hour, my class, there's this concept that we can bring in earth energy and heaven energy. So what the heck does that mean? So that could be sort of like temporarily allocating more CPUs on the cloud that we can use. And it's like you can almost reserve as many CPUs as you want, but the downside is if you just reserve a bunch of CPUs and you don't consciously set what those CPUs are going to do, it could cause problems. Like you want to reserve the resources that you're going to use properly. Like you could pull in a lot of resources and then do something that might be harmful to yourself or others. So there's kind of, it almost is like we have this unlimited ability to bring in resources. There's this other thing I just want to throw in real quick, is they talk about in Qigong this idea of stuck energy, which is almost like this idea that you allocated a CPU, but then you let it sit there for too long, and then it ends up actually causing problems later. Like it actually acts like a barrier within your body, like it becomes like corrupted. And so what you want to do then is you want to release that CPU and remove the blockage, and then put in some fresh CPUs that that have been what do you call it, re-imaged.
But I'm pretty sure those, if we have those type of issues, I think they are not happening in the non-physical. When you are purely, fully in the non-physical.
Yeah, it's much easier to work with. I think in the physical, there's just so many layers of filters that prevents us from easily, and also the damage. We can reserve a bunch of, let's say, bad CPUs in the spirit world, and it's not a big deal. But if you bring them here, and your physical body is somehow interacting with that, then your physical body could get damaged. That's the theory, at least.
Well, but for example, when I do the visualizations, I don't see neither any lack of energy at some point. Maybe when I start, sometimes it's not easy to start, but once I keep going, I can keep going for a long time. Once I tune to the
well, so the secret is in and out. You can bring stuff in and then you kick stuff out. As long as there's that free flow and you're not just like, as long as you're not hoarding that energy, it's fine. It's when I think I think a lot of times it's like negative emotions that bring in energy, and then you keep it, like you almost hold on to it because you feel like you need it, and that's what creates problems. Like when somebody yells at you, you can take that energy and then just let it percolate inside your body, or you can just say, oh, that's interesting, and then release it. And so it's the difference between allowing information to flow through you and just collecting it and just storing it within your energy bodies. So you're probably allowing things to flow through you. So that's why it's not a problem.
Well, another thing that I think it might be going on is that is like what you can do today, for example, that if I if I send a prompt, AI prompt to my computer, it might take longer that I send a prompt to, for example, Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
So most probably what's happening in the visualization is like everything is computed by source, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm just channel it. So channel it would be more like I'm using a terminal. So I'm not using my CPU. So that's why the consumption of energy from me is minimum, because I do the work. I mean, I let source do the work, and I just basically get a flow of output from source.
It could be the different APIs that we use to interact with source. Like if you use it as just a free-flowing resource, it's not a problem. But maybe there's a certain amount of energy that maintains your physical body, and maybe some people take that energy to do something, and then in doing so, it messes up that balance that's going on in maintaining the physical body. Whereas you are able to sort of like allocate some fresh CPUs, use them, and then deallocate them when you're done.
Yeah, because for example, another thing I noticed is that when I do the visualizations, sometimes I feel like I even slept. Like I don't feel tired. My body feels like I slept.
Mm-hmm.
I feel more. It's like any meditation.
No, that's good. That means that in some ways, while you're in that state, the rest of your body is chilling out, and in some ways, it's not being during that period of time. It's not being bombarded by the stressful thoughts that we keep percolating in our head. It's able to just chill out for a while and regenerate. I feel like so much of this is person dependent, and it depends on how well everything is functioning. If I feel like you're somebody that doesn't have as many blockages, at least naturally, that let's say I did when I came into this planet in this lifetime. And so I've had to do a lot of work just to reach the point where I can be chill.
No, but in my case, it's not like I started the level I am now. It was like a process. Mm-hmm. It was a process of practicing, trying, and became better and better. But one of the key components was that I trusted, I have faith that source can do anything I can think of, and even things I cannot think of. So when you start thinking that way, I think it flows better, because for example, when I started creating these new tunnels, mm-hmm. it's because I had a strong faith I could do it. Because if you start like thinking, I don't think I will be able to do it, mm-hmm. then you're already restricting yourself.
So So as somebody I was talking with recently, it's this concept that that we can consciously decide to allow or disallow things. So if you say, I can't, that's not going to be possible, then you've actually created an energetic barrier so that it doesn't become possible. This is especially true with interacting with the non-physical. I feel like it's a little bit overgeneralized to the physical world, where I think a lot of things happen anyway. But I think when it comes to our interaction with the non-physical, our thoughts are very, very powerful. So they can, like you said, either create an opening and allow you to do something, or they can actually create a limitation. Another thing I wanted to say real quick is I believe that the API has like high level and low level commands. So what you're saying when you can say, I can do anything, it means that you know that on some level that there's a high level command that requires very little expertise that will allow you to do things just unimaginably complicated. But there's also a low level API, if you're so interested, where you can micromanage more how to create things, and then learn about how these things are actually achieved, if you so care.
Another possibility is that, well, not possibility, I think I observed this already, is that when, let's say, I call the team, my team, it's okay with it, things come easy. But sometimes I want to do certain things and they don't come easy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it may still be possible that I might do it like next day or next week or next year. Or it might be because they want me to go in a particular direction and not so much in another direction. But it's always, the advice is always to think in the most optimistic way, is that I will be able to do it. And even if I cannot do it this week, I might do it next week. And it's like somebody that is playing a sport and they still didn't, win a particular tournament, but they see themselves as playing good, playing better, and say, well, one day is going to come. So always with the faith that it is possible for you to win something, to get something.
So this reminds me of the, what was it? It was a Jim Carrey film where he got to play God for a little bit. And one of the problems, so he became God for a little bit, and he got like thousands of emails from people who wanted to win the lottery. So
Yes,
you know what? So he said, okay, fine, you win. So now thousands of people win the lottery, and then the prize is like tiny because it's got to be shared among all these people. So I think the way you're looking at it is what they call time coding. It may not come immediately what you want, but within a certain period of time, it will probably occur. So there's no need to stress about it. Basically, your guides or the people that are working with you are saying, okay, let's pace this out. Let's set this in a certain direction, and you'll get your opportunity. I know I have that battle too with my guides, because I'm thinking, well, if I get this skill or ability or, develop a device to communicate with spirits, that it's going to be this wonderful thing. And they're pushing back and saying, maybe not, maybe it's not quite time yet. So what I feel like is that there is plenty of opportunities and space for me to choose what to do, but there's also restricted space. So as long as you can just stay within the very wide expanse of things that you're allowed to do, you're fine. It's when you try to go too far off the rails that they seem to push back, or they don't help you as much. They're kind of like, you're on your own, dude.
And I think I wanted to go back that we didn't say the feeling that up is related to better in the non-physical, because I always tend to go up, like down is the bad thing, up is and you feel exactly like when you're floating, when you're going, let's say, in a rocket going up, or an elevator, let's say, something like that. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, it seems pretty universal, but I would say that it's true of the astral plane, that up is a very clear going from lower to higher vibration. I think things get more complicated beyond the astral plane. I think things start to branch out in many directions. Like, it's not a single dimension of low to high vibration. I think there's a lot, it gets more complicated beyond the astral plane. But certainly when you start from a dream state and you want to move to a higher level, up is the direction. And I read about this, I was just reading somebody's retrieval. Somebody did a retrieval. They didn't know when, they had never had a retrieval before. And sure enough, when they were taking the car of people with them that they were retrieving, the car was like heading in an upwards direction. So there's definitely a universal notion of upness, at least within the astral plane. Beyond that, I'm not so sure. I'm not sure that up is the only direction towards higher realities. It may be more, there may be other dimensions of travel that one can take.
No, I don't think it's the only direction, but I think it's in general the direction of, like you said, higher vibration or lower vibration. Did you feel that in the retrievals you usually go down and then you go up again?
Yeah, so from the dream state, I'm sort of in a neutral realm. I'm almost always heading down. Every once in a while, the retrieval actually occurs where I was dreaming. Basically, they're getting impatient and they go ahead and just plop me right into the retrieval space. But a lot of times I'll start out in a fairly neutral dream state and then head downward. I would say like 90% of the time I'm heading down. I've never headed upward for a retrieval. As once again, the simple theory for me is that the reason that I do retrievals versus say non-physical people helpers is that I have to go down to a level that the non-physical helpers have difficult accessing, and these are the lowest astral planes. And so by definition, they're always down. Now, if you want to go down just to explore the lower realms, you're free to. But I often find that my goal when I'm just freely exploring is I want to talk to people that are more knowledgeable, and they tend to be in higher up rather than lower down.
Right. So, well, I think going back to the features of the non-physical, I cannot think of anything else. Can you?
Okay, well, let's see.
Well, feelings, of course, love, feelings, love.
Well, the fact that that space is malleable. So I'm not entirely sure that the astral and the mental plane reflect all of what's possible in the non-physical, but they certainly are thought malleable, which is to say that almost without fail, I can create or destroy anything within any part of that realm. It's almost like the permissions are set to all plus read, write, executable. Even though I might be sharing space with other consciousnesses, we all are competing for creating thought forms within that space. And that's different than the physical in the sense that I feel like the physical world requires actual action for things to change. We can't just necessarily think things into reality. They have to be physically moved around.
Well, I remember more things now. You said create. Create is one of the features. You can create. You can attract also. Kind of like what I do when I visualize. I attract.
You can bring things towards you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and then like Seth says, the same way you can use your consciousness to move spatially, or I mean, from one place to another, you can also do it with the time. So you can stay at some place and focus on going back in time or going to the future. And the future is the most probable future. It's not like set. At the past, you can go to the past and you can also do like if scenarios. If this, what if I do this instead of that? What if I, for example, didn't get married? What if I got another child? So you can also play with time.
I have used the play with time to see what the future looks like. I have never used it though as a linear mechanism to just go backwards and forwards to see things sort of play out. That's definitely something I need to experiment with. And once again, because the astral or the spirit realm is more flexible, these things are a lot more possible. I also believe in multiple timelines. So the possibility that you could be in the astral with a bunch of people, and these people are actually not from our timeline. They're from a slightly just different timeline. So their facts, like who is the current president of the United States or who was the first president of the United States, stuff like that could actually be different than ours. And we're both completely valid, but we're just coming from different timelines.
Well, that's part of the what if scenarios. I mean, when you change some parameters and then, yeah, I mean, they behave exactly like timelines.
So the question though is, do those realms actually exist? Like, are there actually other timelines that occur that people incarnate into, have experiences, or are they just probabilistic things that didn't?
Well, the question I have is, for example, and it's minor because what happens if somebody tries certain scenario after that person tried? Mm-hmm. Is it saved? That's the thing, or it creates a new one on the fly. Because, for example, let's suppose that you go and make Hitler die
Mm.
5 years before.
Mm.
What if I also think about doing the same thing? I don't know if
don't
I'm
know
gonna
that
see
it would.
exactly what you saw or not, because maybe it just get from what it got when you tried and it got stored, and then I just retrieve that or not.
So the question is can you do something to change the timeline and then wake up in a new timeline? I don't feel like that's happening, but I certainly think that the astral provides, or the spirit realm provides, a simulation playground to see how different things would play out. But I don't know that those actually exist as a physical mechanism. I feel like the physical worlds, even if there's multiple of them, there's a finite number of them, and they don't just get created because we think them into existence. I think there's like a fixed number, and maybe it's possible that we can jump from one of them to another, but I don't know that we can just start spawning off thousands of new physical universes.
Well, there are two things there. One is like I just said, the storage. I don't know, because for sure the one we are currently right now, for sure everything gets stored.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it is stored at the same level with an alternate,
Yeah, it may be more like
alternate timeline.
it may like they might store like differentials.
And the other aspect is the players.
Mhm.
Here we know that all the players, well, we don't know about the number of NPCs, but we speculate about that. Because some people look like NPCs. They say, I don't have free will. So you wonder if they are really, if they are NPCs or not. But putting that in on the side, I think we have all the players here, right? Or most of the players.
Yeah.
But maybe in these other timelines, I don't think it's stored in the same way, because maybe you get like 10 players at a time, or a smaller number.
Yeah. So that's one theory, is that in order to populate all the timelines, you and your soul tribe go into that particular timeline, but then everybody else is not real. I don't know. It's an interesting theory, but I don't like the concept that people are not real, because I think it takes away our ability to have compassion. Like when you see something terrible happen, you say, "Oh, those were just NPCs." I feel like that's a very dismissive way to look at.
Well, but that's another good point I have, and actually I have against this reality, is that why don't we use more NPCs? Because the advantage of having more NPCs is that you have less pain. And that's another thing I wanted to add about the features of consciousness, pain and pleasure.
That's right.
The two, like pleasure in general is a positive feedback, pain is a negative feedback. So you get your hand to the fire and you get burned, you get a pain because you know you shouldn't do that again. And if you get a pleasure, you don't get a stomach pain, then you're gonna eat the same thing again because you know it didn't cost you anything bad.
I see at least in the lower realms of the non-physical, that a lot of emotions are possible, and feelings are possible. Now they may not be as intense, the painful stuff, or the emotions may not be intense. I don't know, but I have experienced pain in the astral. Like there's a hot energy sometimes that I'll touch that feels ouchy. I'll feel pleasure if I go to the higher planes. I'll feel like I'm on cloud 9 for a while. People get angry. People get nervous. So emotions do seem to exist within the non-physical. But it's possible that in the higher vibrational realms, everything is more numbed. Like there's just more of a general feeling of wonderfulness. And so you just don't experience as much. The dynamic range is smaller.
Another thing that I was just thinking when we talk about the past, trying some timelines or new timelines, is that I remember recently Tom Campbell in a video was saying that there's no many things to do in the non-physical. That's why we tend to get to this type of reality. But I was thinking something very cool to do is to gather with friends, let's say 10 beings in the non-physical, and go together to something in the past, let's say together to World War II, and then experience something, maybe change some parameters, but everybody together being there. And that would be kind of like a movie, right? Because a movie of somebody or some people that go together. Well, the typical one is going to the past where you are with dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So you get 10 people and then you go travel to the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you can do, apparently.
Yeah.
You can go and see the dinosaurs
So what
together.
you're talking about is like an interactive. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of those mystery restaurants or whatever. You know, you go to this place and a murder happens, and then your group of people are now working together, or like escape rooms is a similar concept. So yeah, I think those things are possible. Everything that I've seen, but then again, I'm not looking, is just basically people are not very creative. I think people just sit around and just just talk about their past and what they did. I don't know if people start to go into adventures type things. I think they do, but I think I just haven't seen it because maybe I wasn't looking for it. But it's
actually when you bring something like that solve a mystery and stuff like that, then you wonder how much that is of trying to learn, trying to practice different ways of approaching as an event, a scenario, different ways of thinking. In that sense, it's very positive. But at the same time, what if some people are there just to win, only because of their ego, just to win?
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, games in general can be positive or can be negative. Because if beings in the non-physical are only playing games only just to please their egos, only to feel good and that's it, or is it because they want to get better, they want to, because another important feature is that you can, and that's what I say. Seth says that you can feel in the life review, that you can feel what you cause to other people or other animals. They say, if somebody mistreated a dog, they can feel what the dog felt, and then so that those type of I don't know if to call it game, but those type of accesses, they can teach you because you can see the other side of the equation. What and that's something I think I would like to explore after I die, that to see the perspective of other people, not just mine.
I think we've discussed this a lot about like the things that you would like to do, and I think the way you could look at the non-physical then is that there's lots of tools, there's lots of things you can do, but oftentimes we lack curiosity, maybe because we're just so happy being in that blissful state that we don't, so it does take a certain amount of maturity and a certain amount of curiosity to say, you know what, I want to do these extracurricular things in between. So I agree with you. I think all these activities are possible and things that we can't even imagine. And it really just comes down to the curiosity of the soul, how much they explore and how much they want to learn about these things. One thing I was wondering about is like sports. In the physical, sports work really well, but in the non-physical, is there sufficient rigidity within the simulation environment that you can fairly play like a game of tennis with somebody? Because I would just look at the tennis ball and just make it move somewhere else, right?
Well, I heard some people saying, I think people here in the East saying that the main difference is that people don't get tired.
Yeah,
So
that's funny.
Unless, like you said, maybe you add it to the game because you can add those type of restrictions.
Yeah,
So,
but the question is, one thing I worry about is, will I be able to read a book in spirit world? Because
Yeah, why
I can
not?
just by looking at the book, I can modify its contents. So will things be sufficiently static that I can actually enjoy what other people create, or am I going to just end up just creating things and
No,
not
no,
really?
I think because I see it on my visualization, you can read the book super fast, maybe in one shot,
Yeah,
and
you
then,
got to. Yeah, you got to be able to look at the whole page before it changes.
but you can also go slow and just stay in
Nah,
one page.
if I start looking at the words too much, they just start flipping around and everything gets all crazy. Because it's almost like when I focus on something, when I observe something, that also puts my creative energy in, and it causes me to change things. So I'm wondering to what extent that I'm gonna have that ability or disability there, or whether maybe I just be in a scenario where I hear things rather than maybe I'll just listen to audiobooks or something.
One reason, another reason I question this reality is that apparently the one of the main goals in this reality is power.
Mm-hmm.
And power is usually related to money. So basically, because when people talk in general, what is success? And usually when you mention success, people think about money, or success in the sense of being able to have a family, a house, children. But well, in that sense, it's more than power, right? More than. But I mean, that's a problem with this game, I think, because I think the goal in the non-physical is for us to improve, to get better, to be more love, right? That's the typical phrase they use, to have less fear and more love. Um, and here you have that the goal is usually power, or I mean, being successful in the sense of getting certain things like having a wife, or a husband, having children, having a house, having a car. Uh, that's not exactly improving yourself for something that is useful in the non-physical. Because I mean, you die. I mean, what happens? Are you gonna still play that you have a mansion there? Are you gonna feel that some
Everybody
people are
has
gonna,
a mission if they want it.
if they want it, right? Some people are gonna miss their cars, their, I mean,
Yeah,
friends, and they might build it there. I don't think I feel that I need to build, but maybe it's okay to have a house because you can have it a virtual house here. Let's say if you are in the metaverse or omniverse,
yeah.
you might build your house, virtual house, so people can visit you and then have parties, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so. That is an aspect of the non-physical, is that there's presumably unlimited resources. But maybe experience things, the experiences aren't as rich. I don't know. I mean, it's possible in the higher vibrations, they're just as rich, but it's like you can have more, like you can eat as much food as you want in the non-physical, but you'll never feel full, is one way to look at it. It's like, so, maybe some people want to come back because they're like, oh, I love the sensation of eating food, and I just can't get enough food in the non-physical to sate my appetite. So,
Yeah, but I don't think that's the case because in non-physical you can also eat anything you want.
but
So
it doesn't taste as good.
no, why not? It can taste the same.
Well, it can if you develop a good sense of what things taste like. I think sometimes when I eat things, it just doesn't have the same. It doesn't taste as good. It's funny when I drink water in the astral, for example, in the lower astral, it tastes very chlorinated. It's like, what? Why? I don't know. It's
Well,
just
but other people like Tom Campbell said that they can feel the food the same way. So
okay.
he
Well,
can
that
feel.
to me, that yeah.
I
So
don't know.
it's person dependent, right? It's like maybe he developed a better memory of what these things taste like, and so he's able to have a better experience.
But I think the reason is the addiction to having things more difficult. I think maybe people get bored of having food easily there, non-physical, or having other stuff that they like to feel that everything is difficult here. And
Yeah, this is like Minecraft. So there's two modes. Well, there's three now, but there's two modes: survival and creative. In survival mode, you've got to constantly mine for resources. You got to constantly eat, or you die. In creative mode, you have everything. You just build whatever you want. And people find that sometimes they like to be in survival mode because it's just more interesting. That they have to do everything piece by piece. Everything just doesn't come for them. So there is, I can see why some people would be driven to have a little bit of resistance, we'll call it, between them and their goal.
yeah, because now I'm thinking, for example, if you're in the non-physical, you want to build a house, you just think of the house and the house is there.
Yeah.
So there's no time for construction, to buy the materials, to hire the labor. It's just there.
I know.
But maybe people like that house, like to build it from scratch, building in the game, building in the hard way. I mean, look at the pyramids.
Well, it's like I was saying about the high level versus low level API. Some people want to know how a house is built, every little piece. So they're curious. They want to know more, and so then they want to, maybe they first build it step by step in the spirit world, and then they're like, you know what? I want to try this now in the physical world, where I'm actually going to have to put each nail in, and I'm going to have to buy all the pieces. And in other words, they just want higher and higher levels of complexity to keep themselves satisfied.
But I think there is something that you can do. Pretty sure in the non-physical, for example, is imagine a house and build it instantaneously, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after you build it, you can say, well, now I'm going to do a stress analysis in the house. So you're going to have to choose some materials, right? Okay, I'm going to have these materials here, and then run a software that tells you this is going to last 100 years or whatever.